We are good. Okay, terrific.
Just so you're aware.
Yep. Great. So we've got till probably 12:15, half an hour.
That's right, we've got
15.
Or if we go further.
Pardon? If we go further, we go further.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, I now welcome Mr. Sebastian Muñoz-Najar. Have I pronounced your surname correctly? Thank you. In person, and we really appreciate you coming to us today. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to the committee has been provided to you. And for the Hansard record, could you just tell us your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
My full name is Sebastian Muñoz-Najar Leverton. I'm here as an individual providing evidence to the committee.
Representing yourself. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to say to start off with? Seb, if I can invite you if there's a comment you'd like to make, and can I also make you aware that we've got the Deputy Chair, Senator Carol Brown, online. She's in Hobart today, and Senator Corrine Mulholland, who's in Brisbane today. Not everyone can travel for these events, but those two senators are online. They'll have questions after me. But we want you to feel comfortable. We're really keen to hear your evidence. We have your submission, so please feel free to lead off with your opening statement.
Can I just make my introduction?
Sure.
Good morning. My name is Sebastian. I'm 13 years old and I live in Adelaide. I'm pretty much a normal kid. I go to school, I do homework, I hang out with my friends, and like many other kids my age, I have dreams for my future. I want to go to university, I want to travel and see the world, I want a job I enjoy getting up for every day, and I want my own home. Maybe one day I'd like to have a family of my own. I want to feel safe and happy and not spend my whole life worrying about where I'm going to live. Generations before mine grew up in Australia where that kind of life was possible for most people. I think that it should still be possible for me and peers of my generation. But earlier this year, I got worried about what the housing situation was going to mean for my generation. I did the maths and I worked out that if long-term averages continued, I'd be 40 by the time I could own a house. But by then a home in Adelaide would cost nearly $5.5 million. What the numbers showed me was a stark reality where I could never afford a home. So in March I started a petition called Home is a Right. The main things I was asking it for in the petition were limiting negative gearing to just one investment property per person and scrapping capital gains tax discount for investors who own multiple properties. I didn't know what to expect, but as of today, nearly 22,000 people have signed it. More than 210 people have left comments, and 650 people donated close to $7,000 to amplify it. That was a bit overwhelming, but it told me that I wasn't the only person concerned about this issue. One comment that really stuck with me was from a young person named Ariel who wrote the following comment. I care about this because I'm around Sebastian's age and feel very grateful that he did the calculations for our generation and figured out what will happen to housing prices in the future. I want to own a property cozy enough to fit my family and raise them safely, but at the rate we're going, I'm concerned. I believe you can be our voice when we don't know how to speak for ourselves. That's why I'm here. A lot of young people feel this way but don't yet have a way to say it. My petition and the media support that it has generated has provided me the opportunity to be that voice for the young people. So in April, I took the petition one step further and made a formal submission to the Select Committee inquiring into intergenerational housing inequity. My submission included 8 recommendations, which I'll briefly summarise. 1, that the Australian Parliament should pass a National Human Rights Act that clearly includes the right to a safe and adequate home, that negative gearing should be limited to just one investment property per person, not unlimited, the capital gains tax discount for residential investment properties should be cut from 50 to 25%. The money saved from recommendations 2 and 3 should go directly towards building social and affordable housing. That every politician should have to publicly declare if they have a conflict of interest before voting on any laws about housing. That the Australian government should set a target that at least 30% of all new housing developments, all new large housing developments are social or affordable homes. The committee should recommend that the South Australian government pass its own Human Rights Act that includes the right to adequate housing, and that the committee should recommend setting up a permanent housing advisory group made up of young Australians so that we always have a voice in these decisions. I believe these recommendations are what can bring back the Australian dream of owning a home, a dream that right now seems unattainable for many, and in particular younger generations. I'm really grateful for the chance to speak to the committee today. The support that my petition has received shows that thousands of Australians, young people especially, are genuinely worried about the future of housing in this country. I hope that the evidence I can provide today helps the committee take meaningful action on the recommendations I've outlined, and I would like to table the 22,000 signatories and the 210 comments as part of my evidence.
Great. Thank you. Is that, you're done? Thank you. I'd really be very, would welcome the petition and the comments that so many people have provided to you. If you were going to summarise, I think this may be an impossible question, but what do you, when you read those comments, what do you think are the main messages coming out of that? You've clearly said people are thanking you for coming forward. Are there anything else that sort of drops out as clear messages when you read them through?
Well, the main common theme throughout the comments is generational despair. Like a widespread loss of hope among a generation, like a widespread loss of hope that they'll be able to achieve what previous generations did.
Well, that's very sad to hear. I must say, it is, the evidence we have been receiving has been very disturbing around homelessness and about the circumstances in which coming generations find themselves as they approach home ownership. But I must say that despair message that you bring to us is very disturbing, but very important for you to put before this committee. You mentioned now over 22,000 signatures. You'll be aware that Adelaide is now, in fact it's in your submission, amongst the most unaffordable cities on the planet. And thank you for your submission. Very comprehensive, very well constructed, and in clear agreement with a lot of evidence before us. So what we are hearing from you in your 8 recommendations, you have some unique recommendations which I'm very keen to explore, but you are on very shared ground with many other submitters. It's really important we hear from young people. Why did you start the petition?
I started the petition mainly because I was concerned about future housing affordability and stability for me and the rest of my generation.
Mm-hmm. And when I look at your recommendations, you talk about establishing a human right, housing as a human right, changes in the tax system, there have been steps in that direction since you began your petition, and a very strong commitment, a push for bigger investment in social and housing investment. I wanted to go to your 5th recommendation, that every politician should declare their position. How do you see that connection between people who sit in Parliament or on this side of the table at an inquiry like this and our material circumstances, what we own? How do you see that as affecting the way we create policy?
Well, I think every person has their own motivations for their actions, and people's circumstances will affect their decisions. I'm not willing to wager that a group of people would vote for something that negatively affects them, and that's one of the reasons that I would recommend a conflict of interest declaration.
I find this really interesting. I'm watching, as you perhaps have been in recent times, the reaction to the changes in the capital gains tax discount and the negative gearing changes, and the financial press and many developers and others in the financial community who are probably have a vested interest in as much as they own their own home at least. Many of them have been very worried, presenting themselves publicly as worried about any fall in the price of housing. There hasn't been the same voice for young people about what, having watched houses increase in this city by 400% in the last 25 years. What's the perspective that you have about that possibility that house prices might fall?
Well, I think that, like you said, an increase of 400% over the past 20 years is not going to be heavily affected by like a slight fall or people moving out of investing. And I think that to the people that are concerned about prices falling, prices have been rising so dramatically and so quickly recently that I don't really understand why anyone would be concerned about them falling. I just don't see any drastic change, like reversing the effects of the past 20 years of prices increasing.
Thank you. And just before I hand over to, I think, Senator Mulholland, what's your perspective about the bank of mum and dad being an increasingly important source of support for some young people? Some young people who can find their way to get that support, much more likely, the data tells us, to find their way into secure housing. What's your thinking about that and what that means for young people differentially? Yeah.
Well, concerning mum and dad investors, I'm not against people owning investment properties. I'm only...
Sorry, I didn't mean that one.
Sorry.
I meant... Let me just clarify. I'm sorry I haven't been clear. Not you, it's me. I'm talking about the phenomena where if you've got wealthy parents or even middle-class parents, they perhaps can lend you $5,000, maybe more, to help you get that deposit together, whereas people in other lower-income homes don't have that support from their mum and dad. So we've had evidence telling us that will widen inequality. The people who can get that help might get ahead. People who don't now, generation to generation, fall further behind. That's what I was trying to get at. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I don't have a response for
No,
that.
no worries. That's great. Thank you. Senator Mulholland.
Thank you, Chair, and a big welcome to you, Sebastian. Thank you very much for joining us. So I was very impressed to read your submission and very impressed to have a look at your petition. So at 13, you've started out on this campaign, you've created a website, you've made a submission to a Senate inquiry, you're appearing before a Senate inquiry today, which is impressive. What is the one thing that what is the one thing that you think that government and policy makers need to know about how young people are feeling right now about housing?
I think that government and policymakers should understand that young people are knowledgeable of this issue, are concerned about this issue, and will take action if no action is taken on this issue.
And I was reading on your petition on your website that says, you're obviously pretty good with numbers, that by the time you're 40, if prices keep rising in Adelaide for homes, the average price for a house would be $5.5 million. What do you think that means to someone like you who's going to be finishing up high school and thinking about university and going to work. What does that, what does that prospect mean to someone like you?
The prospect of it, like prices skyrocketing and being so.
Yeah. Does it mean that you'd ever, at that price, would you ever be able to get into a home of your own?
Well, yeah, if prices do continue according to current trends and increase to $5.5 million by the time I am 40, that means just complete and total unaffordability, like across the board. I don't really have any way of describing it apart from if I hadn't like saved or gained significant amount of wealth between now and then, I don't see any chance of me getting into the housing market.
And when you talk to your friends, and you're all talking about what the plans might be after school, are your friends saying to you, that they're in a similar situation? My house, they might be living with mum and dad for a long time, or thinking about whether or not they can share house or rent. What are the conversations you're having with your friends at the moment about when they think about the prospect of leaving school and trying to get into the house market as well?
Well, one of the most common comments I hear from my peers is that they believe that they will never be able to afford a house. Like, simply that they don't believe that they will ever gain enough wealth to get into the housing market as in the state that it is now.
And in your submission, you've made eight recommendations. What if you had to pick one or two as your top one or two that, if we as a committee were to consider as part of our recommendations to government, what are your top one or two recommendations that you think we need to sit up and take notice of?
I think my top two recommendations would be the ones most similar to what I was calling for in the petition, that negative gearing should be limited to just one investment property per person, and that the capital gains tax discount for residential investment properties should be cut from 50% to 25%.
Thank you for that. My last comment will just be that Adelaide and South Australia has given us the youngest ever senator in Senator Charlotte Walker, who was elected at 21. You might just beat her if you keep on this trajectory. So you watch out, Charlotte Walker. You might be hot on her heels as well. So my message to you, Sebastian, is keep going with your advocacy. You're a very impressive young man, and we've got a 22-year-old senator that sits with Senator Pocock and Senator Brown and I in the Senate chamber, and you could just as well one day as well, if you were interested.
Thank you.
No worries.
Totally support what Senator Mulholland is saying there. It's a wonderful thing you've done, and it's really helpful to us as a committee to bring that perspective of your generation into this. It's a rare thing. Senate committees are, for many people, really scary. I remember when I first appeared at one, my legs shook a lot. I was very grateful for a chair. So it's very important that you represent not only your own perspective, but you're bringing the perspective of your peers, which is very important. And on that front, one of your recommendations is for a Young Australians Housing Advisory Panel.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
You're choking on the water, you're right. Is for the Young Australian Advisory Panel. And I thought that was a really interesting proposal. How do you think that kind of advisory panel on the question of housing would help policymakers and governments?
I think it would help because it allows, it doesn't mean that a voice like mine, someone who's worked and created a petition and come up here to be there constantly, it would just provide a voice for young people in the Senate and during decision-making processes that I don't really see commonly. Like you said, the youngest senator is 22 as of now, so and people under 18 cannot vote. So people below 20 really don't have much of a voice in decision making right now, even though we are a large portion of the population. And I just think that this kind of advisory group would assist in that.
I think it would too. I wonder what your thoughts are about your peers and your people alongside you at school and so on, when they feel that hopelessness and despair about owning their own homes and having the kind of deal that previous generations have had more access to. Do you think it causes them to kind of give up on politics and politicians? What's the impact on their sort of interest in politics, do you think?
Interest in going into politics?
No, in the whole world of politics, reading about it, knowing about it, having opinions, paying attention. Is there a price we pay in terms of people disengaging amongst your peers?
Well, I have heard common themes and of dissatisfaction with inaction from government. So, yes, I do think so. That it might affect people's engagement with the political world.
Thank you for that. At the end of your comprehensive submission, you pose us a challenge as a committee, and a challenge really to the government and to the Parliament more broadly, where you say, for you as a generation, you want to stop the finish line on housing running away from your generation. It's just becoming increasingly difficult when you apply your mathematical calculation to the years ahead. A $5 million house in Adelaide is on the horizon. I think that's a very important challenge. Is there anything more you'd like to say about what you want the government to do on this front?
I just want the government to make sure that every generation has equal opportunity and equal capacity to own their own home and have their own place to live securely.
That's very clear in your recommendation. You also talk, and it's clear you've done research about these issues, that you would like to see us set targets, a bit like the Vienna circumstance, that the Vienna model social housing targets is something you would recommend. You recommend a national social housing target of 30% or more for social and affordable housing in all major new residential developments. Can you tell us a little bit about why you think that's important?
I think that's important because it ensures that there's always going to be a place people can go, even if the circumstances aren't ideal.
Okay, so a target would help government focus on what's needed. Is that one part of your thinking there?
Yeah.
Okay. You also talk about something called the compound effect in section 6.4 of your submission. I've got it in front of me, that's my advantage, but you talk about the compound effect on young people. Do you want to say a little more about that? For example, it's not page numbered, but you talk about a young Australian entering the workforce faces several barriers simultaneously. You start a career with a HECS debt, average $27,600, which really reduces how much you can borrow. You talk about paying the average kind of rent that people are paying, which is 38 to 50% of after-tax income. You talk about the needing to save for a deposit, which is now much, much longer than earlier generations. You talk about stamp duty, which is, on average $50,000 for lots of the average home. Needing a household income, which is very high relative to perhaps the median income right now. It's very to service a mortgage without stress. And then you contrast that with the massive growth in wealth for people who are already owning their homes. So you see these issues as kind of building on each other to make it an impossibility for your generation. Is that reading your data appropriately?
I do think so, and I did make the same statements and assumptions in the website that I made and the petition.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks so much for your evidence today. I want to say that we often have witnesses before parliamentary committees who, when they're asked a question and they don't know the answer to it, doesn't stop them from trying to answer the question based on absolutely nothing. So I want to particularly congratulate you on saying and drawing a line around what you want to offer an opinion or evidence about and when you don't. So thank you. Not everyone has the poise or the I don't know what the right word is, but the sense about relying on real evidence when they give their answers. So thank you. And really appreciate both your very comprehensive submission, all the work you've done to represent your peers, but also appearing today. It's not an easy thing and you have done a great job. Thank you.
Oh.
We'll suspend for lunch.
We're going to suspend for lunch, and if you have any further information, let me just conclude by saying you want to give to us or questions you've taken on notice. I don't think you did, but we'd like to hear from you within 2 weeks if you're getting the transcript on Hansard. Thank you.